Well, everyone, I don't know how, but the last two chapters of my Little Dashie Threequel were somehow cut off of the second part. Somehow nobody noticed, myself included, for 2 whole weeks. So, yep, I had absolutely no idea until someone named the Mythu told me about it. So thank you. So here's where I left off. Or rather, where I was cut off. Having been in Equestria for nearly 6 years, I've changed quite a lot from the man I once was. I never would have thought I would have a daughter, or live in Equestria with Rainbow Dash. I was a closet brony, left in a dark, drab, and depressing world after my parents' passing. I never thought that I could love again, only live and exist, being nothing more than another person. Dashie had brought so much happiness into my life. I just don't know what would have happened had I not found her that day. Here I am, in Equestria, on my couch, recounting my life in this old journal. Yet, in a few hours, I'll be leaving to Canterlot for the Gala. Dashie isn't going to be wearing a dress this year. Instead, she'll be wearing her Wonderbolts jumpsuit. Rarity insisted on modifying it, but Dashie and I convinced her that any additional weight could be problematic. The Wonderbolts have got a flyby planned, as they do every year, but this year's supposed to be extra special. I can only hope that it's going to be as awesome as Dashie says it will be. The sun has now pierced the horizon, and looks better than usual. Celestia must be in a good mood for once. I really don't want to deal with her or the stares from other ponies. But for Dashie, I'll do it. I'm running out of room in this dusty old journal, but at least when I'm older and can't remember so well, I can read this and know that I lived a good life. Dashie just called for me. She must be waiting around impatiently, probably trotting around the room for no particular reason. I need to buy a new journal, but until then, goodbye. Signed, Brian. Dad! Rainbow's scream shook the entire house. Brian sighed as he closed the lid on the inkwell and laid the large cyan quill next to it. He placed the warm notepad on top of the other two notebooks near a small pile of large cyan feathers which he had been using as a quill. I'm coming, hold your horses. Dashie's ears perked up at the sound of her father's voice. She rose from the rug and trotted to the wooden door. Well, finally, come on! She pushed the door open and took to the sky. Enthusiastic as always, huh, Dashie? A slight giggle left his lips. His daughter was already far past earshot. The fancy suit that Rarity had hoof-stitched for the occasion was fit perfectly. It added the perfect amount of class, yet didn't look overly snobby. The front door was closed behind him. There's no need to lock it, he thought. Ponyville never had a problem with burglary anyways, especially not in the middle of the day. The walk to the train station was a well-deserved solace for Brian. The last few months had been hectic for him, and most every pony else, especially Dashie. Come on, Pops, we're going to be late. Brian was still taking his time getting to the train. A cloud of smoke bellowed out the top, covering Rainbow Dash in soot. She growled, and then shook off the black substance. She flew into the train. Her father wasn't very far behind her. The train ride was a quick one, yet during the entirety of it, Brian couldn't stop thinking about that last journal, and the other two he had used, full of diary entries and stories of his life. It had become part of him for the last few months. What if some pony had read them? Would they care? Would the hours of pondering see something of worth? Would all the wrist aches be worth it? Who knows? But for now, I have a gala to attend. Epilogue. The Gala. Or, because 17 was an odd number to end at. Leading the Wonderbolts was Dashie. To her left was Spitfire, and to her right was Soren. The rainbow trail behind her softly glowed against the light smoke that the other 4 Wonderbolts produced. Soren looked at Spitfire. She gave him a nod. Both Soren and Spitfire broke off from the group and flew in opposite directions. Large grins spread across each of their faces. This is gonna be so awesome! They both hovered in place, high above every pony, waiting impatiently for the optimal time to do it. Rainbow Dash looked up through the tinted goggles and saw that her friends were in position. She flew up into the night sky. The 2 ponies on either side of her flew off and waited for the signal. Dash looked around and saw that all 4 ponies were ready and waiting in position. She took a deep breath, let it out, and began her descent down. The familiar mock cone soon began to form around her. Her goggles nearly cracked from the immense change in pressure, yet somehow managed not to. A boom shook the entirety of Canterlot, leaving ponies, at least one dragon, maybe a griffin and zebra or two, and one person in awe. Brian stared into the night sky, watching his daughter and feeling pride swelling in his heart. He smiled up to the night sky, watching the performance with engrossment. Soren and Spitfire flew towards the rainbow, being careful not to interrupt the trail. They flew around. Both of them soon felt the spark of energy at their hooves. Now! They flew towards the rainbow, spinning around and lighting up the colors in a double helix of lightning. The sparks at their hooves danced across the rainbow trail, causing bright shards of color to break off and shatter in the night sky. In unison, the trio pulled up back into the sky, mere inches before hitting the ground. A plethora of color blinded the audience. The shouts and cheers emanating from the crowd reached the ears of each and every Wonderbolt as they flew by the mass of enthusiastic admirers. One such voice stole Dashie's attention. "Yeah, Dashie!" A tear formed in her eye. She knew that voice. Rainbow Dash fought against the wind to look down and see her friends standing around either side of her father, all their eyes looking up at Luna's purple night sky towards her. Pops was waving up into the sky. Fluttershy was jumping up and down, cheering at the awesomeness that is the sonic rainboom, that coupled with the awe-inspiring display of a duo Buccaneer Blaze made for an incredible show. The other ponies were watching in silence, except Pinky, whom was softly chewing on something, yet still enthralled in the performance nonetheless. A smug grin formed across Dashie's covered face. "You think that's awesome? Watch this." Out of the corner of his eye, Brian saw that an alabaster hoof, adorned with a golden hoof guard, had placed itself lightly on his shoulder. He turned his head and followed the hoof to the face of the pony it belonged to, Princess Celestia. She gave him a small smile, one which Brian eagerly returned. It was good to know that they were finally on good terms with each other. Celestia looked back up to her sister's beautiful night sky. She never really could do as great a job as Luna did. Alongside the princess of the night's sparkling stars, the persistent rainbow slowly began to fade alongside the darkness of the night and the blue lightning that had been spawned at the hooves of the two Wonderbolts. The other two ponies, one a mare with a white muzzle and a curly mane of yellow. Her dark purple eyes could see through the cyan-tinted flight goggles. The second pony was an older stallion with a mane of white that had long since lost its color, and a dark gray muzzle peeking out of the blue flight suit. They shared a brief glimpse, then nodded to each other and began their flight towards the fellow Wonderbolts. The lightning around Soren and Spitfire began to disperse, as did the rainbow falling behind Rainbow Dash. Seeing the lightning had come to a halt, the other two Wonderbolts flew straight into the trail, sending the remnants of the shattered rainbow color above the clouds, which in turn generously reflected the color tenfold back into the audience. The deafening shouts of the crowd was reward enough for the Wonderbolts, but it wasn't quite perfect. Not yet. The Wonderbolts landed on the ground, all of them exhausted, yet Rainbow had one last thing to do. She stood upright to remove the hood of her suit and galloped over to her friends and father. Dash tackled Brian to the ground and brought him into a tight embrace. She looked up to see Celestia and bowed her neck. Gently, she rolled up Brian and said hello to the princess. Seemingly from the night sky itself came the younger of the two royal sisters, the regent of the moon and stars, Princess Luna. "Hey, Luna," Dash said as Luna softly made contact with the earth. The dark blue alicorn took the first few short steps over to her sister's side and looked down to the smaller cyan pony in front of her. "Hello, Rainbow Dash. It's very nice to see you again." She looked to the man lying on his back on the ground. "This is your father?" Dash nodded. "Well met." Brian dusted himself off and stood up. He's noticeably taller than Luna, and at nearly perfect eye level to Celestia. Glancing down to Luna, he outstretched his arm to shake hands and hose with her, but was surprised when she drew him into a Ursa hug. "Thank you," Luna said in a near whisper. "And thank you, Rainbow Dash, as well as your friends, all of them." Her hoof behind Brian's back waved across the night sky. The star's shine glinted across the purple beauty which she crafted with an insurmountable joy. Tears formed in the corners of her aqua-rimmed eyes. No pony had ever blessed her night with such a gift of beauty, nor taken an interest in her night. Ponies simply slept through it, while they worked and played during the daytime. Celestia looked to Brian. He had a look in his eye that said, "Please, help." However, she simply let out a brief regal chuckle. Luna's hoof, which was outstretched to the sky, came down and squeezed Brian once more. A soft crack echoed through his back. Luna took it as a signal to finally stop the relentless hugging. The sound of many pairs of clip-clopping hooves coming up the grassy hill took every pony's attention. Hey RD, why'd you run off like that? The raspy voice of Soren called to her. You've gotten quite a lot of fans, Spitfire added, as she moved out of the way, revealing a group of fillies and colts, each with some sort of Rainbow Dash-themed memorabilia. There she is, one colt shouted. Thanks, Miss Spitfire, a filly chimed in. The foals soon circled around Rainbow, shooting question after question towards her. Some asked for autographs, which Dash kindly obliged to, but there were simply too many little ponies for one mare to handle. I'll, see you guys later. She let out a nervous chuckle to end the statement. With a smile, she floated away with the little ponies all around her. Soon, she was out of sight, but Brian knew that she was more than capable of taking care of herself. It's hard to believe, but Brian really was getting old. His years were finally catching up to him, and seeing that his daughter had grown up had shown him that. Pops rubbed his eyes. It was getting rather late, and he had stayed up all night. He simply didn't have the energy he did in his youth. Brian took a seat on the grass, being careful not to ruin the suit further with another grass stain. Under the influence of the stars, sleep soon consumed him, but he didn't dream alone. Rarely did he ever. He saw his parents once more. They were all in his parents' old house, which he hadn't seen in so very long. The same house which he grew up, and the same house he lived in when he found Dashie all those years ago. The table clacked with the sound of teacups as Brian and his parents reminisced. Laughter was the only ambient sound as stories of his daughter were exchanged with his parents. A soft clopping on the door and a soft flutter of wings told Brian exactly who it was. He excused himself from the table and opened the door. A plumage of cyan feathers and a polychromatic mane greeted him at the entrance. Wordlessly, Dashie flew over to hug him. Brian's parents stood under the doorsill behind their son, looking at the little blue pony he had held tightly in his arms. They couldn't be prouder. His mother got teary. Of course, they were there to see him grow up and mature into a man, but the concept of having a daughter, regardless of species, made his mother realize that they had both done an amazing job as parents. Now, it was their son's turn to be a parent. The world around him soon started to fade. He said goodbye to his parents, hugged them both, and returned to reality. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Dashie was in his arms. Her rose-rimmed eyes opened as a small warm smile appeared on her face. He pulled her into a tight hug. She whispered in his ear, "Thanks, Daddy," and hugged back. "Anything for you, Dashie." And so ends My Little Dashie, a threequel. I'll admit, I liked it a little bit more this time, though still not as good as the other two in my opinion. So every pony, if you enjoyed this reading of My Little Dashie, a threequel, be sure to comment, rate, and subscribe. And perhaps even hit that little share button if you know anyone who likes ponies, or readings of fanfictions. And until next time, farewell.